Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of Decryptage. We are pleased to receive Eric Ogunleye, Director of AfDB's African Development Institute. Mr. Eric Ogunleye, welcome to Africa 24. So many important topics were discussed at the 2024 African Economic Conference held in November in Botswana. They were all interesting in terms of ensuring Africa's economic stability. According to you and the work that you do you think the African economy has a chance?
Africa has a very high chance. And I say that because of what I see. When I go to countries, I see a lot of enthusiasm from both young and old, from different stakeholders who are interested in charting the future of Africa. So when you see such and you meet with such enthusiastic people who are determined and working really hard to ensure that Africa develop, you know that there's hope for the continent. So what I see when I go from Egypt to South Africa to Nigeria to Ghana, and you see a crop of people, experts, technocrats, who are interested in working very hard, go extra length beyond call of duty to ensure that the continent implements policies, diagnose the challenges. It gives me hope that indeed, even though it may appear that the problems, the challenges are daunting, but they are not insurmountable.
Capacity building is often cited as a key pillar for sustainable development. What specific gaps in skills and institutional capacity do you see as the most pressing for African countries, and how is the African Development Institute addressing them?
Well, there are lots of emerging challenges that the continent is facing for which Africa needs capacity. One of them has to do with the issue of climate change and climate financing. This may not be new to some extent, but it is relatively new on the continent because these are emerging challenges that the continent is facing today. So there is need for increased capacity when it comes to managing when it comes to managing climate-related challenges that the continent is facing. The issue of how do we mobilize resources at scale to be able to deal with the challenges. Because today, climate change, the impact of climate change is a reality. We see cyclones, we see typhoons, we see, when I was flying to Gaborone, we flew over some lakes. On the screen of the television, on the screen of the flight, you can see that there's supposed to be some lakes under, but looking through the window, they were all dried up. These are evidence to show that climate change is a reality. So we need to develop skills and capacities that are required to be able to deal with these challenges, to mobilize finances that are required to deal with them. Another area is what I alluded to earlier, which is the issue of debt management. Public financial management, debt management are additional challenges which are emanating from challenges like climate. Because as a result of climate change, insecurity, and several other challenges that the continent is facing, we notice therefore that we need more resources, additional resources to finance to deal with these issues. And what that means therefore is that the continent needs more what I would call longer-term, lower-interest finances that are required to make this happen. But unfortunately, the current structure of the global financial architecture does not make that to happen because African countries, for example, usually there's an African premium that is tagged to some of the... So there are some additional resources that are required to make this happen. So in the process of dealing with these issues that the continent faces and raising resources that are required to deal with them, you see a number of countries falling into a state of debt distress or at the brink of getting into debt distress. So we need a lot of capacity on public financial and debt management that is required to be able to manage those.
The AfDB has prioritized enhancing the capacity of policymakers in African countries. Can you share examples of successful programs that have strengthened economic governance and policymaking on the continent?
We have so many of them. And I'll give you just one example. I was attending a meeting in Guinea-Bissau some few weeks back, and it's a meeting of West African Tax Administration Fund. And at the meeting, we have the revenue authority, the director general of one of the country's revenue authority was there. And he walked up to me and said, "Oh, thank you very much for what the African Development Bank is doing. We generate more than 100% of the revenues we used to generate before your support." So what did we do? We support the revenue authority of this particular country, I don't want to mention the name, to be able to double their revenues. This is indeed a success story, because we have a situation where countries that were earning much less before can earn more because of the support we give in digitalizing their revenue system. So that's one thing we do. And what that means is that a number of leakages that were coming could be plugged with such digital innovation that we provide for them. The second success story I have also noticed is with respect to Ghana. People today use Ghana globally as a success story when it comes to restructuring debt. And recently I was with one of the officials who told me how they did it. So we have a lot of innovation within African countries, with countries making moves, taking steps that ensure that we're able to deal with the capacity gaps to ensure success in our policy making and the impact on the economy.
Digital transformation is reshaping economies worldwide. How is the African Development Institute leveraging technology to deliver innovative capacity building solutions, particularly in rural or undeserved areas?
Okay. I mentioned earlier, if you recall, that we have a number of academies. One thing to note about these academies is that all of them are virtual. And to have a virtual academies means you must leverage technology. Before now, all the capacity development offerings of the bank, you have to go physically to the countries, or they have to come physically to a particular location to deliver them. But as we speak today, we deliver capacity development training and technical assistance at scale to several countries, 54 African countries at the same time, leveraging technology. So at the African Development Institute, we have a platform we call Virtual Capacity Development Academy. And that is the platform that we're using to reach out to countries in a larger scale. And I give you an example. In the first training of the Public Financial Management Academy we had, there were we started with 145 people from 45 countries. Based on the rigor of the training, at the end of the training, about 51 graduated from around 24 countries. Now, because of the success of that first training, in the second cohort, we had requests for about 600 positions, starting from 145. That is possible only because we leverage technology. So using that technology platform has really assisted us to provide capacity development support to countries at scale, to reach people. Again, you remember I mentioned earlier about some countries that we call transition states. Some of these countries, of course, we know they have some weaknesses, whether in internet connection and so on. What we do is to provide specific support to this group of countries, given the weakness or the challenges we see them. But at the end of the day, we're able to reach more participants in more countries at the same time, which helps us to be able to deliver on our mandate of assisting the countries to do better in terms of dealing with the uncertainties that they are facing today.
Africa's youth population is expected to double by 2050. What role does capacity building play in equipping young Africans to drive economic growth and innovation amid rising global uncertainties?
Okay. Let me answer your question by giving an example of what we're doing that leads credence to the fact that we recognize the role of the youth. Come February next year, we are planning to launch what we call Youth Community of Practice. And what the Youth Community of Practice will do is a platform that provides a framework for African youth to get together, to deliberate, to discuss, and to provide insightful solutions to the challenges we face. As you rightly mentioned, the youth in Africa, Africa is a youthful population as we see it, because a greater percentage of the people are youth. And so we need to take into cognizance the views, the perspectives of these youth in shaping the future of Africa. So that forum therefore provides that opportunity where there's an interface. It's an intergenerational platform that allows both the older ones and the youth themselves to come together to provide solutions to the challenges that African countries are facing. And the first policy dialogue will focus on how we can leverage the intellect, the skills, the innovation of the youth to be able to deliver on food sovereignty, to help African countries to achieve food sovereignty. So we do really recognize that the youth is the future of the continent, not just the future, but even today. And so we are already engaging them today, working with different partners across the space, the African Union Commission, the UNDP, the Economic Commission for Africa, and relevant other partners to ensure that we leverage the intellect and also the experience of the youth to shape the future of Africa and achieve the Africa that we want.
Mr. Eric Ogunleye, thank you for answering our questions. Dear viewers, thank you for following us. Find the full program on MyAfrica24 and Africa24TV.com.